Today on the Vantage Performance Podcast, we know, of course, that businesses only succeed when they're focused and they've got a mission. If you lose that focus, there's the danger that you're going to allocate time, energy, and resources in directions that won't necessarily be profitable. So how do you stop that happening? The big questions you need to ask to ensure that your business has the clarity to continue to succeed. That's today on the Vantage Performance Podcast. And welcome along, I'm Phil Dobbie, and Michael Fingland joins me again, Executive Director and CEO of Vantage Performance. Now, last time, Michael, we looked at the questions you ask when you're taking on a new turnaround client so you can understand the chance of success in saving a business that's facing difficulties. So today, let's stop that happening in the first place. Let's look at the questions a business should be asking itself so it doesn't get into difficulties, so it stays on track and never hits those problems. And I mentioned the word clarity a moment ago, and that's key, isn't it? Because for lots of businesses, they may have clarity at the beginning, but over time, that sense of purpose gets muddled, doesn't it? And the original vision can get lost. We see it happening so many times.
Yeah, it does, Phil. Good morning. It's one thing that we've instilled in our team for a number of years now is to really stay focused on what are the 1 to 3 big questions that really drive the business, and we do the same with our clients. And it naturally starts with the number one big reason why you're in business to start with. What's that one big problem you're trying to solve, and out of that process, and we've talked about developing your why or uncovering your why. And then, using all your purpose is another way of calling it, and then making sure that's really clear and consistent through your marketing, your recruiting, and all the rest of it, on the back of the Simon Sinek sort of breakthrough. And it sort of spawned from there. So, that should be the number one big question that drives you every day. And for us, what's the bedrock advantage is 2/3 of, and most people have heard these stats, but 2/3 of all businesses don't make it to 5 years, and 80% are gone by 10. So, and the frustrating thing in business is that with all the advances of information technology and intelligence tools, those ratios haven't changed much at all. But we're constantly looking at how can we change that outcome, and that leads into our big why, which is all about making businesses stronger and more resilient so they can withstand the sort of typical shocks that happen as they grow. So that's that number one big question. And
you got a number to that. In your example, you're saying you've got a statistic there. You've got a bit of insight which you can use. So is that important? Because there's a danger, isn't there? If you can have you can address the purpose, but maybe address the problem, I should say. But maybe that problem is not as big as you think it is, unless you fully research it.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. You did need to research it, but I guess the point I'm making there is that's the foundation. So you need to, in any business, you need to really get clear on that one big problem, and therefore what's that one big question that you continually look to answer. And I say this all the time, business actually isn't that difficult, but the biggest problem is people don't have the discipline to implement. I mean, our fast track program, as you know, is a collection of all the systems, habits, processes, policies that long-term successful businesses all have in common. And the key is, once you're implementing those initiatives in that program, it's the discipline to make them stick and keep them repeating. And that's the same thing with the big questions is, what are the other 2 or 3 around that you literally review every quarter when you're looking at reviewing a strategic plan. A couple of the other ones, just for context, how do we get through to directors in denial? Because in the turnaround space, trying to cut through to directors when they're in incredible amounts of stress, the business, everything is riding on their decisions. Very difficult to get through to them early enough, and that's the holy grail with turnaround, is to try to get to businesses before the crisis gets too acute. So that's a question that we're always researching and spending real time, looking at developing initiatives to get through that one. How do we get introduced to clients earlier? Is another big one. And they think of a pyramid. You have the overarching question at the top, and then what are the 1 to 2 or 3 questions below that feed into that. So you need to sort of answer those questions sequentially upwards.
So are these based on making your business a success, or making you, and I know these are sort of part and parcel of the same thing, but making you differentiate yourselves from your competitor?
Well, you'll naturally differentiate yourself. If you are focusing on answering all the time, what is the number one reason why you're in business? What's that one big problem you're trying to solve? So that will naturally make your business stronger, because if you're constantly focused on that and answering the 2 or 3 questions that feed into that, it's going to transform the way you go to market, your marketing material, the way you recruit, the way you manage the business, and you'll end up with a much stronger more resilient business as a result. But the number one, or one of the big questions that we started doing a few years ago when we came across Seth Godin's book Purple Cow, highly recommend reading it. It's all about, we all know about USPs and needing to sort of stand out from the crowd, but he sort of takes it to the one step above and says, that's no longer good enough. A lot of companies have points of difference and the like, but the focus should be on how can you be more remarkable. And it's a very interesting concept when you sit and think, well, what could you be doing or known for that makes people really stand up and remark about you as a firm?
And have you got an answer to that question? Because what you've told me so far is that, yes, you need to get to the right people, and you need to try and change the way people are thinking. And then, and your ultimate aim obviously is to try and make sure that fewer businesses go to the wall. But that remarkable question, how do you stand out? Because anyone else in your game is going to be trying to do the same thing, aren't they?
They are, but very few literally spend quality time researching that question. Actually having the discipline to regularly review that question is actually part of it, because the insights you get when you literally sit down for an hour or two once a quarter, and we do it at our annual offsite, and it's a key agenda topic for those 2 days, is over the years we've built up half a dozen things that truly separate us from the market. Our turnaround success rate of 87%, 12 to 18% return on our fees, the 14 or so awards that we've won, turnaround awards, all those things. Obviously, naturally, you end up feeding into your marketing material. But when you're constantly looking for ways and new initiatives to implement into the business that are going to really separate you from the pack, it by default, you strengthen the business. But it's that discipline of constantly revisiting that question and never resting, and always looking for ways to be truly remarkable. It could be the way you go to market. It could be the type of people you hire. It doesn't really matter. It's just that discipline and the insights that come out of it when you give the team the freedom to just whiteboard all types of initiatives, and then the key is then to work out which ones are going to have a really big impact and then implement them.
Right. So an example of one that I have is that, not that I'm saying I'm necessarily anything remarkable, but what I do with my quality check, which I just do all the time, is if I do a 5 or 10 minute podcast, every 5 minutes really, I've got to have learned something new. If I haven't taken anything on board in that 5 minutes, it's just been people talking.
Yeah, and look, I can attest to that. I mean, we've been doing these podcasts on turnaround and whatever for years now. You're probably one of the most learned turnaround experts.
As a result of it, absolutely, because I've learned something every 5 minutes. But how do people arrive at these things then? Because you and I seem to have got it sorted. We might be, but there again, you see, maybe we were wrong as well. Maybe we've got maybe we're thinking that we're remarkable, or we've got the right solution to be remarkable, but maybe we're wrong on that. How do we know?
You just got to have. I mean, this gets drummed into you as a kid, but that insatiable appetite to keep learning. If that's drummed into your team, and that's something that is a key sort of fact of the way you operate, that's going to stand you in good stead anyway. And again, as I said before, it's all about discipline. For you, the discipline is learn something new every time you do a podcast with an expert on whatever topic. And then over time, it's that typical snowballing effect. Over time, that turns into something quite powerful. And again, it's the discipline. So that's the biggest gap in all business that we see, is you've got fantastic management teams that got great ideas, but they don't have the discipline to implement the things that all long-term successful businesses have in common. And that's why they don't, or why they do get into some strife in the first place, or they don't.
Well, the bigger the team and the harder it is as well, of course. I mean, there's two sides to it. On the one is that, coming up with those questions that you need to keep on asking yourself, and then the other one is making sure that everyone keeps on asking themselves.
And that's the big issue with your, the why, your purpose. That gets fuzzy as a business grows, and that is very normal and very common. So literally what we do, the three big questions that we are always searching to answer, we've got them on canvases around the office. Our number one question we have: how can we be more remarkable? It's there, so it's in the team's face constantly. We sit down once a month, or once a quarter, I should say, and brainstorm more ways to be more remarkable. But it's constantly up around the wall in our offices, so it's just that constant reminder, so it doesn't sort of get fuzzy and you don't lose sight of those really big driving questions.
But it doesn't have to be that question. It's a good question. How can you be more remarkable? But it doesn't have to be the same for everybody, does it?
I would highly recommend every business implements this number one question. The insights you get from sitting and thinking around that question truly does transform the business. And it's one of those universal initiatives. I'll definitely have a session on that. It's taking a USP to the next level. Have a session on that and literally implement those one or two big things that you think we may not be known for yet, but we're striving to achieve. And read the book, Purple Cow. It's a very insightful
a game changer.
Book. And it is. And then again, the discipline to regularly review that question. And then you'll find over time, you haven't just got one thing that separates you from the market. You've got 6 or 7, like I said before. And that's when you've truly got a defensible business that can withstand shocks and you'll outperform.
So problem you're trying to solve is where you start. You've got to get everyone, I guess if you haven't got that right now within the organization, then you've really got a problem. Get everyone together and try and get that sorted out. And then from that are going to spring those 3 other questions, which are going to have some consistency over time that you need to keep on asking yourself. Yep. So you're making sure everything you're doing is following those 3 questions.
And highly recommend you add to that, how can we be more remarkable?
And read the book. Great.
The book out.
There we are. I've learned 10 minutes worth there. It's been worthwhile talking to you. We'll catch you again next time. Thanks.
Cheers, Phil.
Pretty straightforward, isn't it? More insights from Michael Fingland next time on the Vantage Performance Podcast. I'm Phil Dobbie. Thanks for listening.